Former Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass, began a hunger strike in prison to protest against his political persecution after being kidnapped by Ecuadorian authorities who broke into the Mexican embassy in Quito. Muslim families celebrated the Eid Al-Fitr holiday in Palestine amidst shelling and famine caused by the Israeli forces. And in Russia, authorities in the Orenburg province evacuated about 8,000 people after the Ural River flooded. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos. I'm from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Former Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass, began a hunger strike in prison to protest against his political persecution after being kidnapped by Ecuadorian authorities who broke into the Mexican embassy in Quito. This was reported by Glass attorney Sonia Vera Garcia, who was able to contact her client by video call after 5 days in prison. On the contact, Jorge Glass described the outrages and violence he went through during his abduction on Friday at the Mexican embassy and his transfer to a penitentiary center. Glass further thanked the government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador for having given him political asylum. This is the first appearance of Glass since Monday afternoon, when he suffered a decompensation in La Roca prison and had to be transferred to a nearby health center.
Four police officers kept me like this, and these scoundrels read me my rights, and then they tied me up in a chair to film me again. I was all beaten up. They sit me down in a chair. I bent to the left while they were reading my rights again. They asked me to sit up straight, but I couldn't, because of the beating they gave me. There are two videos. The one when they took me out of the car, just like that, all tortured, hanging me by the thumbs, like dictatorship times, and this second video, fortunately published by President López Obrador. In all, I want people to be crystal clear that Glass is not going to give in.
And the hearing of former Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass, was scheduled on Thursday to analyze his habeas corpus request. The appeal was presented on Monday to the National Court of Justice by the former president of the Citizen Revolution Movement, Francisco Hidalgo, alleging that Glass' arrest represents an illegality that violates his human rights and international standards. The hearing will be held after unfolding that Jorge Glass is on hunger strike and that he was tortured by police officers after his detention in the Mexican embassy. The visit of Colombian President Gustavo Petro to Venezuela has come to an end. The trip sought to foster economic integration and the establishment of political peace. The Colombian president met with the government of Nicolás Maduro and with representatives of the opposition as a way to contribute to the construction of peace and political coexistence in Venezuela. Likewise, the Venezuelan Foreign Minister Iván Gil described the day of dialogue as fruitful as it helped to strengthen the bilateral relations of friendship and diplomacy. For his part, the Venezuelan president also praised the visit and highlighted Petro's particular insight into the global climate emergency.
We have ratified the need for union, joint work, cooperation, brotherhood. President Petro has a very clear vision of the subject of the climate emergency. I think he is one of the presidents in the world who is clearer on the subject, who is more informed. I think he is one of the presidents of the world who has studied the issue of climate emergency the most. He has an almost prophetic word when he talks about the issue. The first one who spoke about that issue in the world was Fidel Castro. In 1992, who said something like this: there is a species in danger of extinction, the human species.
Meanwhile, in Colombia, the prosecutor's office filed an indictment on Tuesday against former President Álvaro Uribe as the alleged perpetrator of crimes of bribery of witnesses in criminal proceedings and procedural fraud, for which he will be called to trial. This is the latest update in a long legal battle in which the Superior Court of Bogotá last ruled in October against filing the case following a prosecutor's request. The accusation was brought by the first prosecutor before the Supreme Court of Justice, Gilberto Villarreal, who took on the case that dates back to 2012. According to sources from the prosecutor's office, based on the physical evidence and probative elements, it was concluded that there are sufficient grounds to indict Uribe. The prosecutor's office has added that once the judicial distribution process is completed, the hearing for the formalization of the indictment will be held on the date and time set by the judiciary. Upon assuming the case, Prosecutor Villarreal had 90 days to substantiate the accusation against Uribe, a term that will expire on April 15th. Uribe will be able to respond to the process in freedom, as this is the norm in all cases, and the deprivation of liberty is an exceptional measure, according to the prosecutor's office. Now let's review some facts about Álvaro Uribe. At age 71 years old, he is a Colombian lawyer, businessman, and politician. He was elected president of the Republic of Colombia in 2002 and re-elected in 2006. His government was criticized for human rights violations, vote buying in Congress to approve re-election, interception of phone calls or chuzadas to opponents. He was also linked to massacres carried out by paramilitaries and the creation of false positives. Uribe is currently facing charges for alleged procedural fraud and bribery. In other news, in the United States, at least 3 people were injured and 5 were arrested after a shooting during an event for the Muslim celebration of Eid Al-Fitr in west of Philadelphia. According to the Philadelphia Police Commissioner, the event took place at 2:30 p.m. at Clara Muhammad Square, where approximately 1,000 people attended to celebrate the end of the Muslim festival of Ramadan. The local police showed up a few minutes after the attack started and arrested 3 suspects, including a teenager. Among the injured were 2 teenagers who were shot, as well as a third 15-year-old girl who had been hit by a police vehicle, causing a broken leg. Now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In India, thousands of devotees gathered at the Jama Masjid in Delhi on Thursday to offer prayers on the occasion of the Eid Al-Fitr, a 2- or 3-day holiday at the end of the Muslim holy fasting month of Ramadan, one of the 2 main Islamic holidays. The main celebration was held at the Jama Masjid Mosque in New Delhi, where the faithful performed special prayers to bid farewell to Ramadan, a month-long period of fasting, prayer, and reflection. The end of the fasting festival represents a moment of joy, gratitude, and union among Muslim families, who represent 14% of India's 1.4 billion inhabitants at present, being the largest minority group in the Hindu-majority nation. During Eid al-Fitr, most people travel to visit each other in the city or out of town, and children are giving new clothes and spending money for the occasion. In Palestine, Muslim families also celebrated Eid Al-Fitr holiday, but amidst shelling and famine caused by the total siege of the Gaza Strip by Israeli forces. In the midst of the festival of breaking the fast, marking the end of the month of Ramadan, the Israeli occupation army launched multiple attacks on the devastated Palestinian enclave. In this regard, at least 5 people were killed and several were wounded during the early morning following shelling and artillery attacks on a residential building and a school in the Al-Nusrat camp. In addition, at least 2 mosques located in the camp were also targeted. Since October 7, 33,482 Palestinians have been killed by Israel, most of them children and women.
The day of Eid Al-Fitr, such an important day for the Palestinians, was marred by death, displacements, and a humanitarian crisis affecting the country due to the crimes committed by Tel Aviv.
We prayed to God since the first day of the war. We have been displaced. We left our homes and went to Bani Sida. From Bani Sida we went to the schools. The Jews took us out of the schools, and this moment we are making this sweet of Eid. Eid Al-Fitr has arrived. Thanks to God we are alive here in the tents.
During the Eid Al-Fitr holidays, thousands of families only wish for an Israeli ceasefire in the occupied territories so that they can return to their homes.
We pray to God that we can return to our homes and that there is tranquility. The holidays have arrived with the joy of Eid and the culmination of the month of Ramadan, of course. It is not like every year. Actually, we fast the month of Ramadan, but we do not feel the spirit of these occasions. It is not like before.
Amid Israel's threat to occupy Rafah, thousands of Palestinians fear displacement from their shelters and separation from their families.
God protect Rafah, its inhabitants and their homes. In Rafah, we have many friends. We have been in Rafah for some time now. If they invaded, of course we will have to flee to the area we left. We went back to see how the situation is there, and it turns out that everything is destroyed. We had to return.
For millions of Palestinians, the Eid Al-Fitr holiday has been for years a day of celebration and family bonding, but sadly, it is now marked by sadness to the death of thousands of innocent Palestinians executed by the hands of Israel.
On the second day of Eid al-Fitr, the Palestinians continue to make a call to the international community to put pressure on Israel and stop the war. Let's see the details with our correspondent in Gaza, Noor Harasin.
This is the second day of Eid Al-Fitr here in Gaza, Palestine. And what you are seeing behind me is a small group of gathering people clapping and chanting for the international community to put more pressure on Israel to stop this Israeli war on the coastal enclave. These people also have been speaking about how Israel should allow the return of displaced people from Rafah back to northern Gaza. This comes after the assassination of the sons of Ismail Haniyeh. Ismail Haniyeh is a political leader in Hamas. He is the head of Hamas political bureau. He was wanted for Israel for years now. He's as important to them as militant leaders like Yahya al-Sinwar and Muhammad al-Daif. However, he relocated from Gaza to Qatar back in 2016. Yesterday, and while his family were in a visit to a relative home inside the Ashati refugee camp, an Israeli drone targeted their car, killing 3 of Ismail Haniyeh's sons and 4 of his grandsons. One girl, her name is Malak, and she is Ismail Haniyeh's granddaughter. She is still in a...
We stay in Palestine as on Wednesday in the occupied West Bank, hundreds of Israeli settlers and village attacked a village in the West Bank. Zionist settlers early Thursday morning infiltrated into an Alabama al-Shaqiyya village and set fire to a house and a vehicle before residents confronted them. They also injured a local citizen and left threats in Hebrew with graffiti. The village had already been attacked in June 2023 when Israeli settlers vandalized stores, cars, and a gas station. On the same day, soldiers of the occupying army stormed a village in Nablus Governorate, in addition to the town of Tul Karem and the suburb of Jawaika. We move on now to other topics. At least 17 deaths and dozen injuries were the casualties of a truck accident. Such a vehicle was carrying pilgrims by the time it rolled over into a ditch in Pakistan. The accident occurred on Wednesday in Hab district, Baluchistan province. A deputy district commissioner, Mughmir Ahmed, said that over 70 people had set out on a pilgrimage to Shah Nurani, the shrine of a 15th century Sufi saint. According to preliminary information, the vehicle rolled into a curve. The driver was also wounded and is now in custody.
A traffic accident occurred near Nuani Cross. Our control room received the information at 1:15 local time. We sent ambulances. There were 35 to 40 injured and about 17 deaths. They were first transferred to the civil hospital in Balochistan, and then the corpses were brought here to the Eid Al-Fitr Goth Center.
And we now have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and also share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In Russia, authorities in the Orenburg province evacuated about 8,000 people after the Ural River was flooded. The authorities reported that 7,800 residents were evacuated from the flooded areas and are currently being housed in 40 shelters. On Thursday morning alone, a total of 11,972 houses and more than 14,000 plots of land were flooded. The Russian Minister of Construction, Irek Fayzulin, pointed out that the level of the river in the city of Orenburg rose to 10.69 meters and is expected to rise even more in the next 24 hours, which would expose 3,580 houses and more than 3,000 orchards in the different municipalities to the risk of further flooding. Meanwhile, in the United States, several storms have hit the Gulf of Mexico, with reports of damage from Texas to the Florida Peninsula and the death of at least one person. More than 30,000 homes and businesses were left without power in Saint Tammany Parish, Louisiana, where a tornado hit the city of Slidell, ripped roofs off buildings and partially collapsed others. Slidell Mayor Greg Cromer estimated that about 75 homes and businesses were damaged in the city and warned of a situation similar to that of Hurricane Katrina. In this regard, the National Weather Service said in a press release that the area was hit by a Category EF1 tornado with winds between 138 and 177 kilometers per hour. The European Commission carried out an analysis of forest fire frequency and damage in 2023. The investigation also included the wildfire impact on the continent's economy. According to a report based on data provided by the European Forest Fire Information System, 2023 saw the largest fire season in Europe since the 1980s. In 2023, more than 500,000 hectares ended up destroyed, placing it as the 4 worst scenarios of the century. Meanwhile, so far in 2024, there have been almost twice as many fires amid droughts and high temperatures. And the United Nations organization warns of the need to resume the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed requested urgent measures to resume the Sustainable Development Goals since they have not been achieved. In the report presented by Mohamed, she affirmed that the situation is worse than in 2023 after COVID-19, the conflict in Ukraine, and the aggression in Gaza. The UN representative accused humanity of losing its moral compass, which leads to a development crisis that requires a greater financial effort. In other words, an additional $4 trillion by 2030 to meet the proposed objectives. According to the United Nations Refugee Agency, women and children in Sudan are currently facing a particularly alarming situation, both inside and outside the borders of the conflict-torn nation. Those displaced beyond Sudanese territory, mostly women and children, are arriving in remote areas with little or nothing and a desperate need for food, water, shelter, and medical care. 1 year after the outbreak, the 2024 Regional Refugee Response Plan for Sudan is barely 7% funded, while the response efforts within Sudan is only 6% funded. Agency figures estimate that more than 8.5 million Sudanese have fled their homes since war broke out between rival armies last April. And we go now to the world of sports. The Venezuelan Johandri Granado qualified for the Paris 2024 Olympic Games after reaching the final of the pre-Olympic Taekwondo tournament held in the city of Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. The athlete, only 24 years old, reached his Olympic goal by beating Colombian John Garrido in the semifinal round in a continuous way in 2 rounds, 8-2 and 10-3. Granado's outstanding performance was not only worth him for reaching the grand final of the competition, but also became the 25th athlete to join the Venezuelan Olympic Committee that will travel to the next Olympic Games in Paris 2024. And Chileans attended the opening of the International Aerospace Exhibition, which is Latin America's largest aerospace fair with exhibitors from over 40 countries. The International Aerospace Exhibition is considered the most important air and arms exhibition fair in Latin America. This year, more than 456 exhibiting companies from 40 countries are participating. Some 100 aircraft are on display, including the U.S. Air Force F-22 Raptor, a fifth-generation fighter. Brazilian manufacturer Embraer exhibited an A-29 Super Tucano, which is part of the fleet of air forces of Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, and Colombia, and the E-195 E2 airliner. Israel, one of its usual exhibitors, is absent from this year's edition after being excluded by the Chilean government in response to its military offensive in Gaza. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For teleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.